Good morning. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Zoning and Planning Committee for Thursday, August 9th. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I'm the chair of the committee. With me at the dais are Councilmember Ellison, Reich, and Goodman, and we're also joined by Councilmember Fletcher. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 10 items on the agenda today, including 2 quasi-judicial hearings. Before we go into hearings, we're going to handle the consent agenda. Item 3 is referring staff to a split zoning ordinance. Item 4 is referring to staff an ordinance regarding the regulation of rooftop mechanical equipment, penthouses, and building heights. Items 5 through 7 are the approving of the rezoning applications at 3421 West Lake Street, the 1400 block of Nicollet Avenue, and 3041 Holmes Avenue South, respectively. Item 8 is the denying of a rezoning application at 5400 34th Avenue South. And item 9 is the approving of a street vacation application submitted by Central Lutheran Church for a portion of East 15th Street between 3rd Avenue South and Clinton Avenue and 4th Avenue South. Are there any questions or comments from committee members on any of these items? All right, not seeing any, I will move items 3 through 9. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. We'll now move on to the quasi-judicial hearings portion of our agenda. Item 1 is the consideration of an appeal submitted by Akira Abduli on behalf of Abduli Properties regarding 2 conditions of approval attached to the conditional use permit and the site plan review by the City Planning Commission, approving a new cluster development at the properties located at 415 and 417 Taylor Avenue Northeast. And I'll ask for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Chair Schrader. Committee members, Ms. Wallace, the staff person on this project, is out of the office today. I'll be pinch hitting. This is an appeal filed by the Abdullah Properties for lots located at 415 and 417 Taylor Street Northeast. The R2B zoned properties are, as you can see on the map, uniquely shaped. They have frontage on 3 streets and are also adjacent to a railroad corridor. There you get a sense of the site and the context. CPED currently owns the properties and they're currently vacant. The applicant proposes 6 dwelling units on the site, all detached. Because some of the lots on the property are proposed for the property would not have frontage on a street, the project has to be developed as a cluster development, which allows for flexibility from the street frontage requirement as well as some other standards in the zoning code. This is just a schematic of typical structure proposed. The diagram on the lower part would show the front of a home, and shows the biggest issue that's part of the appeal, which is the garages that are protruding toward the street from the dwelling units. The Planning Commission approved all of the requested applications, including conditional use permit, variances, site plan review, and plat. Again, the appeal is related to the garages, including conditions of approval recommended by staff and largely accepted by the Planning Commission that would limit the extent to which the garages could extend toward the street in front of the habitable portion of the structures, as well as limit how much of the street frontage those garages could take up. To 60%. Just to clarify on that, related to those conditions, the Planning Commission granted some significant alternative compliance for several aspects of the proposal. The garage proposals as designed would need both flexibility from the single-family home standards, if these were being developed as single-family homes, as well as the site plan review standards that are applicable to cluster developments. The Planning Commission did recognize that a couple of the structures are facing a railroad corridor and again do not have street frontage, so they exempted those from the standards related to the garage conditions. However, they did encourage a consistent design among all the structures. The applicant, recognizing that this would result in a pretty significant redesign of the project, has appealed those conditions of approval, and I will stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for staff? All right, seeing none, before I open the hearing, I'd love to give the appellant the opportunity to speak to the committee. Is there someone here representing the development? And if you could state your name and address for the record, please.
All right, my name is Ikran Abdullah, and I am one of the potential owners for these property in question. So just to kind of to give you a little bit of a background for this lot in question, this property has been vacant for over close to 30 years, well over 20 years. It's been acquired by the city, I want to say 1988, and then 89 was demolished. And so the property has been vacant since 1989. And it would be a really good fit property for our family, for multi-generational family that we want to build for this property and make it our final home destination for our family and for our kids. So to give you and talk about the reasons why we appealing today, I'll have my sister Decca to kind of go over, but I just wanted to give you that, just a brief background of that story.
Hi, my name is Decca Abdullah. I'm one of the potential owners of this lot here. And the reason we are appealing in front of you today is because we do not feel that the proposed the limits on the garage size meets our needs, and we considered several other designs, and every other design we've considered would have created other constrictions or restrictions on what's allowed to be built on the lot. Some of the other things that we are planning on using for the garage are storage for bikes, trash cans, lawn equipment. All those would be, because there's no alley, we're required to provide storage for the bikes and the trash cans within the garage. Our proposed garage, and that we would part of our plan, is 21 by 22. In order for us to meet the standards as they are right now, we would have to reduce the garage size to 18 by 19, and that will not provide enough storage for a car, bikes, and storage for lawn equipment. And the way our proposed garage, it doesn't really stand out from the neighborhood. If you drive around the neighborhood, you would see that there's a lot of houses that look like that way. And these are some of the pictures that we have. And this is our house, and that's our house that we're intending to build on this lot. Where's that one? So this is what we're planning on using the garage for. As you can see, this is our intention for that. We're asking the city to, the Zoning and Planning Commission, to allow us to keep the proposed garages as we proposed it, and to remove conditions 2 and 4 from the permitting. We're very excited to build our first homes here in Minneapolis, and we feel that our design will not cause any harm or disharmony in the neighborhood, and that we have the full support of the neighborhood association. Actually, one of our future neighbors is here today, and he's here to support our design. And the neighborhood, we had a letter sent to us, and the person that's the head of the neighborhood association was going to be here today, but he couldn't make it. So we're really excited, and we appreciate your support. Thank you.
So with that said, seeing that the reasons why we wanted to propose this type of design is that we wanted to take advantage of the city's encouragement of wanting to increase minority homeowners and, take advantage of that. And also the uniqueness of this lot itself, it would be really good fit for our family, our unique family size as well, because we are, like we mentioned, we want to build a multi-generational homes for our parents as well, that's going to be part of this residence here. And also the large need for our family. We've been here in the state of Minnesota for about 25 years. This was a really vision of our mother when we came here first in early 1990s. And just to see that it actually could happen, it's really an amazing opportunity for her to be partaking in that, and just to, she's given up a lot of her life and her time for us to, make something of ourselves and go to school and, do all that stuff. So we would love to really give her that gift to be able to, see her dreams come through. And then the other thing that I want to mention and to let you guys know is that I know there's been a lot of mention about the uniqueness of this lot, and then the family, and we are such a large family, and each house yes, they are a little bit bigger than as mentioned, but there's reasons why they are bigger. It's because of the need of the size of the family. For many years, we ended up, usually renting like 2 different apartments just to house the family size, So some of us have at least 5, 6 kids, and as you can see, you need space for that, and you need space for storage. And for this property, doesn't really give us much of just the uniqueness of it and the shape of it doesn't really give us much of a space for storage, since there's no alley back there to do, to park your car, but also to do your, your recycling bin and your bicycles and all the things that you also would need to, to house for that. So that's why we are asking. We did try, played with so many different styles, redesigning it, and Rich is here today can answer some questions that, some of the designs, why it couldn't work. We did really try to work with the city and the zoning and try to come up with a different way without losing so much of the space that we need for the family to accomplish, to accommodate what the city and the zoning was asking. And that's the reasons why we're standing in front of you today, to please give us that opportunity to move forward and build this lot that's been vacant for 30 years and make some money for the city and taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Bill would like to say a few things.
Oh, sure. We'll be opening the public hearing too in a second. So I think, you can wait 1 second if that's great. No, I remember that. So there are no questions. I'm going to now open the hearing to the public. Please limit comments to 2 minutes per person, which will be tracked by the timer by the clerk. If you want to come on up.
I'm Bill Scripps, and I live on 418 Fillmore Street, so we would have adjoining backyards. I've been going to Beltrame meetings and council meetings for years, and I've seen many projects come and go for this property, and they've always ended up to be much ado about nothing. And I think we're very lucky to have a quality family like the Abdulis applying to build here. I want to thank the Abdulis for hanging in there. I know it's been over a year, and I would like to also thank city staff. I know they work hard, and it's been a thankless job for them. I'm proud to live in Minneapolis. I think it's one of the best run cities in North America, and I admire the rules and regulations that make the city what it is. But I think there's a time for even excellent rules and regulations to relax a little if there's a greater good, and I think this is a greater good. The Abdulis would make any neighborhood a better place. Everybody on the council in the neighborhood wants them. Even Jacob Fry, when he was council member, was happy to hear about this proposed project. So I hope you'll cut them some slack. I think they need it and they deserve it. And if you do, Beltrami will be even better than it is today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we sold this property to the Abdulis a year ago, and they had a very large group of family members in front of the Community Development Committee at that time. And we knew that this property had been on the market for 30 years. And we knew they had a large family, and we knew they wanted to do a cluster development. So these are all things that came into play and were discussed at the time we sold them the land. And so given that this is a unique parcel that also has some that don't have front yards, others that do, I think there are circumstances unique to the property that would allow us to grant their appeal. So I'm going to move to grant their appeal and direct staff to issue findings should they be needed based on the fact that this property is unique in the way it is configured.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you very much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the Abdullah family for their persistence. Councilmember Goodman really, really said it right, that this was a project that came to us with a really creative idea for a really challenging site. We're very lucky, I think, that you've come in and seen the potential in this site for your family and found a creative way to make this location work. It's been really lovely to watch the neighborhood really embrace this project and embrace their new neighbors. And so I've been very excited about that. And one of the very first meetings I was in when I came on the city council was actually pulling everybody together to try to talk about this project. And, at that time, we really, I think, ran into some real challenges with the way we've defined cluster developments and the way the family wanted to use the site. And I want to really thank city staff for coming as far as they have in really figuring out ways to solve these problems. I think we've actually gotten to a very good place, and this is the very last little step here. So I'm excited to see this come through. Thank you for being persistent. Thank you for investing in our neighborhood. Thank you for making use of a really challenging site. And I'm really appreciative of this project.
Great, thank you. If no one else has anything to say, I'd like to kind of chime in, and I also want to thank the Abdullah family kind of for your patience and for coming to bring this back. As you know, I voted against this in the Planning Commission, and today I'll be reversing that. I think the concern when we looked at this in Planning Commission, the idea was really, this is a great project. We wanted to go through. City staff has worked really hard. The families worked really hard, but there's just issues with it being a cluster development and also it almost looked like a single family home, and with the garages, and we have to think about the whole city, about what precedents we're setting. But through the work of the family, through the work of Councilmember Fletcher, as well as the city staff, this truly is a unique property, and what will be said here will be truly unique to that property. So I'm happy to be voting in favor. I'll be supporting Councilmember Goodman's motion as well. Thank you. With that, Councilmember Goodman's motion is before us. All those in favor, and this is to make sure to grant the appeal. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? With that, the motion carries. We're going to move on to number 2, which is the consideration of an appeal submitted by Carol Lansing on behalf of Lake Street Apartments, LLC, regarding 6 decisions of the City Planning Commission, allowing a new 6-story 111-unit mixed-use building on the property of 410 and 414 West Lake Street, as well as 2949 and 2939 Harriet Avenue South. And we'll begin with the staff presentation.
Good morning, committee members. Peter Crandall, Senior City Planner with CPED Land Use. The project before you is located on 4 parcels at 410 and 414 West Lake Street and 2945 and 2943 Harriet Avenue South. Those projects are today zoned for the C4 commercial district and the R2B residential district. This project came before the City Planning Commission on July 16th and sought several land use application approvals at that time, including a rezoning for all parcels to the C3A, which will be before you today. Additionally, the project was seeking a conditional use permit to increase the maximum building height, as well as several variances, including a variance to increase the maximum floor area ratio and a variance to reduce the minimum side yard along the north interior property line adjacent to residential property to the north. Staff had expressed concerns about the project from the beginning stages of project development, including the rezoning to C3A at this location and the variance to increase the FAR related to the building's bulk and height and its relationship to adjoining lower scale residential properties. As a result of that concern, staff recommended denial of the project at the City Planning Commission meeting. The City Planning Commission, notwithstanding staff recommendation, approved all of the applications with the exception of a variance to increase the maximum height of a fence along the north property line. That application was denied. The City Planning Commission additionally attached several conditions of approval, both to the conditional use permit application and the site plan review application. And that is the subject of the appeal this morning. This image shows the site as it stands today. You'll see that the site is occupied by several vacant commercial buildings, and then a rendering of the proposed 6-story, 111-unit residential project. So the first, or one of the conditions of approval that was placed on the project by the City Planning Commission is regarding the access to the parking, to the enclosed parking structure at grade. The project was proposing parking access off of both Harriet Avenue South and the adjoining alley to the east. The Planning Commission imposed a condition that the project remove the parking access along the Harriet Avenue entrance and replace that with walk-up residential units, which are proposed just to the south of that parking entrance. City staff have conferred, I have conferred with Public Works on that issue, and we do feel like that would be problematic for the operations of the project, given the conditions of the adjoining alley. It's a very narrow alley, and feel that that appeal is reasonable considering the operations of the project. The other appeal that, or the other application that was recommended for denial at the City Planning Commission regards a fence height location along the north property line. The proposed fence is 6 feet. The maximum height of that fence is 4 feet. And that has to do with how close the adjoining residential property is to that north property line. There's a 2-story, 4-unit apartment building located about 3 feet from that adjoining property line on the north. This is a shadow study that shows the effect of the proposed project in terms of light access to those adjoining residential properties to the north. You'll notice that the apartment building immediately to the north of the property, other than perhaps the summer solstice, would be significantly shadowed by the proposed project. As a result of that concern, the City Planning Commission recommended a condition of approval that the project set back the upper story by 10 feet along the north property line to allow for additional solar access to some of those properties immediately to the north that are of a much lower scale. I should note that staff also expressed concern in the site plan review analysis and conditional use permit in the staff report that I think led to this condition by the City Planning Commission. So we are supportive of that. Another condition of approval placed on the site plan review is dealing with the amount of fiber cement along the north elevation. The project is in excess of the maximum 30% on that elevation. And another site plan review condition of approval concerned the amount of windows along the Harriet Avenue ground floor elevation. The project is required to provide 30% windows along that elevation, and they are not meeting that. I should note that that is a standard that we rarely see projects have trouble meeting. So staff is supportive of that condition of approval as well. And then lastly, and I'm sorry I don't have an image of this, but the Planning Commission also imposed a site plan review condition of approval regarding the ground floor elevation along the alley, and that the applicant implement windows along that elevation to alleviate a blank wall condition and to increase visibility between the adjoining alley and parking lot and the enclosed parking garage. That is a summary of the appeal as it stands, and I can take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Well, just to clarify a little bit, I just want to say that Mr. Crandall, you're exactly right, that at least for myself and other members, it is a big deal to go against the vote of the city staff recommendation. And the conditions we imposed, specifically the 10-foot setback, was a big deal, was a way to try and help what we see as a good project that just isn't there yet, hopefully get there. So I think that's, and I'm basically just saying that for my colleagues' benefit, and to clarify that that is where we were going with that. There are no other questions. I'm going to give the applicant a chance to speak. Is there someone here? And if you can say your name and address for the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Stephen Min. I'm at 1701 Madison Street Northeast in glorious First Ward.
From ESG 500 South Washington Avenue.
We're going to tag team this morning so we have some flow between both the design history and the design implementation, if you'll indulge me, Mr. Chair. A very quick background, as Mr. Crandall pointed out, we have 111 units, 100% affordable in a neighborhood that has not seen much affordable in the last 10 years. Most of what's been on the Greenway and nearby has been market rate and high market rate. This will be ultimately the first of two phases. We have control of both sides of Harriet, and that bears on the history of the project. But for this specific location, we are going to be providing 9 supportive units at 30% AMI with a target toward homeless veterans, and that will be the same in both sides. So phase 1 and phase 2 will serve 18 homeless veterans if the full implementation is provided. Each of our projects, as is typical with our developments, will have the usual LEED type amenities. In this particular design, we have 2 green roofs, one on the upper deck and one on the first floor above the ground floor units and the common areas. We have hoped for a 40 kW solar system. We are one of the few developers in the country that have actually figured out how to do a tax credit solar system in an affordable project. There are actually conflicting tax credits, and we have figured out a structure to do it. This will be our 4th such solar project if we're able to do it. We also have the usual energy efficient amenities. We run through Excel energy programs, and although we don't put a LEED stamp on it, we do everything that is typically required. We just don't need the plaque on the wall and the extra $250,000 of expense that goes with it. All of our buildings, market rate or affordable, have no difference in our amenity package. We just don't believe in doing amenities differently. So for us, it's important to have community room, fitness room, business center, all the amenities in an affordable building that a market rate building should have. And that's what we think is one of the issues at risk here when we talk about the setback that the Planning Commission put on the project. The history with the neighborhood is we actually started a design in January of 2016. So we've had 30 months of community review. We actually were starting on the west side of Harriet with a 130 unit building that flew over the alley. Councilmember Bender didn't like that design, nor did the neighborhood, so we scaled it back, put 2 blocks under contract, and are now before you with 2 separate phases to reduce the massing on Lake Street. It's important to note that along that 30-month discussion with neighborhood groups, we made a significant number of amenity and changes to the design. That list includes, and it's in your packet from our public hearing, we put a transit shelter integrated into the building along Lake Street. We revised the streetscape and landscape plan to meet the Lynn Lake Business Association standard plan. We put a retail component in the site, even though it's ideally not perfect in an affordable housing project. We did fit a retail component in. We were able to get Whittier Alliance's support for this project. Those of you who have some history in the council know Whittier has never really embraced putting more affordable in their neighborhood. They feel they're overconcentrated. To get their support, we worked very hard to get there. At the public hearing, we had the Lynn Lake Business Association, some owners of the property, and the VFW here to testify in support. Their testimony is in your record. We also, because of the rezoning petition, had to get 22 out of 28 neighbors to consent to the R2B up to C3A, and those support letters, 22 individual signatures, were put in the record. So I think we've done our work to get the neighborhood on board. Overall, we've had 12 different community meetings and met with 12 different public officials over the last 30 months to get to the project where we're at. The CUP setback, I'd like to talk briefly about that. And I just want to put this comment on the record. If we want more affordable housing, we're going to have to embrace how we build affordably. That's really an important issue. And Councilmember Goodman, you have for years, when I've come before you in CD committee, asked, how do I get my cost per point lower than some of the other projects that you've seen? And this point of discussion will reveal some of our trade secrets. We pay attention to things like units that stack. We pay attention to not having to alter roof lines and waterproofing so that they become expensive. The 10-foot setback in this particular scenario costs us anywhere from 2 to 4 units, depending on the reconfiguration. That's about $375,000 of hit to my net operating income. It cost me $150,000 for rerouting plumbing for units that now do not stack correctly. It costs about another $150,000 for roof terminations and waterproofing that now has to be customized on that setback. And I lose either the green roof or the solar system because I don't have enough room to meet the OSHA requirements to get around either one or the other. So that's, a small $75,000 hit on my operating expense. But these are items, when you add them up, it can get to be about $750,000. Maybe not such a big deal in a market rate project, but when you're trying to close a gap in affordable, those are big dollars.
And I just want to walk through quickly the diagrams we have on the screen, and they're also in the public record with the clerk. This is the proposed 6-story. So you see the terrace here, a club room. This is all facing the north property line. Unit here stacks below. All these units are stacking with the floors below. If you look at this next diagram, which shows the 10-foot setback, Steve had pointed all of these things out, waterproofing this area, losing that roof on the upper level, and then reconfiguring all these spaces. You end up losing about 3 units because you have to move the club room down here. And then also you can see in the red dashed areas below where all the plumbing is coming up, and you're not stacking that on this floor. So I just wanted to walk through that diagram with you.
We also think the setback doesn't necessarily accomplish what the Planning Commission thought they were accomplishing. There is no change in the shadow study between a building of 6 stories with a 10-foot setback and a 6-story building without the setback. We have that study here.
So on the screen, you'll see the proposed building. These 3 images are from the original proposed building. On here, you'll see the 10-foot setback. And the red line is showing the extents of where the shadow casts. So the 10-foot setback, it's basically unnoticeable where the shadow falls with the proposed project and with the 10-foot setback.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll just point out, we've been through 2 committees of the whole with the staff and the Planning Commission before we got to the formal public hearing. And so if these issues had been articulated in greater detail to us during committee of the whole, maybe we would have made a different orientation of the building. But we did and put into the record 6 mitigating issues with regard to the setback into the record. And the commission didn't take any of those into consideration, which I regret. We don't want to lose the community room, and we don't want to lose the deck amenity. I think that's an important part of an affordable housing project. That should have the same amenities as our market rate deal does. And all of Lake Street in the 2040 plan is guided for 6 stories. And so I think what's really going to happen is these duplexes between Lake Street and 29th are all going to become part of a redevelopment effort. Otherwise, why would you have put 6-story height up and down the Lake Street corridor? And so that's my point about the CUP. I'll talk briefly about the variance for the height on the fence. We think there are 3 elements on the north side of the building that are worth screening. There's an emergency elevator generator, there's an electrical transformer, and there's a dog run. Now, we're happy to work with the CPED staff to come up with a different fence material that's more opaque, but I think we're hurting the neighbor by not screening some of those less attractive items. If we need to spend more money on a fence, that's not going to kill the project. But a 3-foot fence, they'll see the top of the generator, they'll see the top of the transformer, and maybe they don't care. But I just think screening it would be better than not screening it. I want Gretchen to talk about the site plan review because we have 4 conditions there, and then I'll bring you some closing points. Thank you.
Just wanted to start and talk about the material percentages for the project. So on the screen here, you'll see basically the main issue is the distribution of fiber cement. So on the left column there, you'll see the maximum allowed is 30%. On our north elevation, we have 39%. But as you'll see, for all 3 other elevations, we have far less material of fiber cement. So we're asking for alternative compliance because we see this project as not a math exercise of how much percentage you have on each elevation, but what material composition works for the design intent, the projections, and the massing of the project. So again, if we really needed to distribute 9%, we could, but we just feel like the project does comply overall. So that's regarding the material percentages. Mr. Crandall briefly touched upon the access on Harriet. As you'll probably remember, Harriet is a one-way north, and then we have a very narrow alley. So what commissioners were asking us to do was to get rid of these stalls here, which we felt was problematic, limiting more parking, and then put all of the vehicular traffic on the alley. And as Mr. Crandall pointed out, Public Works is not in support of that. We will be able to meet the requirement for glazing along Harriet, even with keeping the garage entrance. We're going to be adding 137 square feet of glazing along Harriet, so that won't be an issue. And then lastly, we did work pretty extensively with the neighborhood about the alley, talking to them about lighting, adding lighting there, talking to them about landscaping, and also about murals. So in the red there, you'll see, again, we had a long conversation and came to this, conclusion that we would put murals along the alley and work with the neighborhood to do that. And this site plan item is really about aesthetics and articulation and not about seeing into the garage and into the parking ramp. So we'd ask that we are able to provide articulation and interest along the alley with these murals. I think that's our last item.
Right. Yeah. But Chair, I'll just close to the point that Gretchen just made on the alley. The murals was a concession to the neighborhood group. I'm happy to put glass block there. I'm just concerned open or windows looking in on a parking garage is not a safe condition, but have to be, if it's a design issue like Gretchen offered, which I think this really is all about, glass block we've done in several other buildings. But I think the murals would be interesting. They were done at Lime, 2 blocks away, and we'll find a local artist to do it, and we would prefer to do that. I'd just like to offer in close, we are really excited about doing an affordable project in this community. We're way more excited about doing 2 phases than just 1. And we're particularly proud of the partnership that we have with the Ballantyne VFW. We've entered into a memorandum of understanding with them to help us locate and tie into the community these homeless veterans. And it's a pilot program for this project. We'll duplicate it across the street, but we're also talking with them about doing it in our Snelling Yards project in the Hiawatha corridor, very close to the VA. So we're anxious to get that in the ground, and we hope you'll support this project so that we have the economic tools to get it into the ground in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the applicant? I've got a couple. Just you mentioned a lot about the what happened at Planning Commission, like to address some of that. Like first, the setback. Part of we very much understand, very much want an affordable project there to go through, and understand the financial hit you'll be taking with asking for the setback. Part of that is why we asked, one of the other conditions was to reduce the parking that was needed, and the idea that you could put more units down there, that you can continue your stacking, you could continue to do everything that you've talked about, but be able to make up some of that finances there. That doesn't help you on the waterproofing, but it is some way that I think the Planning Commission was really trying to make sure that this goes through and still address the bigger issue. You talked about the shadowing and also brought up the comp plan. And the reality is that it's not 2040. This plan is for 2040. You're not building next to a 5-story building. You're not building next to a 4-story building. You're building next to a 2-story building. And that's the big part of it. And so we have to think about how we grow. And I think for myself and others on the Planning Commission, that was a big factor in that. I don't know if I'll give you the opportunity to address that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's an interesting point. Unfortunately, the walkout unit add-on, when you have Gretchen, if you could put the ramp configuration back up. So the loss of the 3 parking spaces notwithstanding, if you put the units, let's say the units are in alignment, now you've got a real circulation problem within the first floor parking, and it makes for a really challenging turn to get to the lower level where the majority of the parking is. Plus, state code requires no greater than 75 feet of exit path for every door. And so we don't have it completely drawn here, but you can see there's a corridor that serves those 3 units. Well, now I actually have to build a corridor all the way to the end. And I'm not sure that by the time I'm done with that, I haven't lost 5 spaces. So I understand the desire, but design on the fly is, too many cooks in the kitchen. And I'm going to ignore the sausage reference about governing, but let's just say that's why we go to committee of the whole. And that wasn't brought up then, and it's not good to work with it on the fly for all these technical reasons that are in the building code.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'll now open the hearing to the public. Please limit your comments to 2 minutes, which will be tracked by the timer by the clerk. Would any member of the public like to speak? Anyone interested in speaking on this project? Anyone? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the hearing and look for discussion among my colleagues. Seeing none, and without any additional comments, I'm going to move to deny the appeal. Now, do we have any discussion? Councilmember Goodman?
I understand that Councilmember Bender is supportive of the appeal. Did she communicate that with anyone? She did not communicate with me.
We have not had a lot of clarity. I think that to answer your question, we have not had a lot of clarity on that. I think that there was very supportive of the project. As myself, I'm very supportive of the project, but I was looking for other things to be able to make this project work, to have some kind of way to have this design work so doesn't feel like a 2-story next to a 6-story. And I don't feel that we've gotten there. And that's why I'm putting forward the motion to deny the appeal. Councilmember Gordon.
So I'm a little bit confused about what the best approach to take here is. I heard staff saying they were recommending that we don't close off the other exit and entrance from the parking ramp, and then that feels like it would be, so my inclination based on that was to grant that appeal. Then it looks like there is kind of a domino effect, because I think the last picture we saw showed that the Planning Commission strategy was to allow some more units down there. Well, obviously, if I supported granting that appeal, it would have an impact in terms of those units that would go down there, couldn't go down there anymore. And so I'm not sure whether that would, even if we asked the Planning Commission again about that, what they would say. So my inclination was to move that we did support staff kind of coming back and recommending that we open up that exit again. But beyond that, I hadn't figured it all out. So I was hoping some of my colleagues on the committee would come up with a bigger picture solution to it. I don't mind stepping back buildings at all, but I also really appreciate all the affordable units that are going in here and all the amenities. So I was relating to arguments on that side of it as well. So I'm sorry, I don't have a motion prepared, but at least now I've expressed my opinion, and it might help if more of us weigh in, and we might find a way.
Well, I appreciate the furthering the conversation. Councilmember Ellison.
My understanding in talking with the Councilmember Bender's office is that they were interested in granting the alley access, but were supportive of the Planning Commission's conditions. So that's my understanding, office to office. But yeah, say that.
Thank you, Councilman Bragg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I've not had any communication with the ward representative one way or the other. I understand the motivation to try to mitigate the size differential from the Lake Street frontage and then the residential to the north. However, what I'm not seeing is really much of a difference, except for the impacts that it has to the development. I mean, if it was a very significant step down from 6 to 4 or 6 to 5, even with maybe a terrace, then I would say, all right, we're really given a real significant nod that would get that outcome, and then you'd have to weigh it against the impacts of the project and what it's trying to achieve. And given what it's trying to achieve, energy efficiency, affordability for extreme populations, is a pretty significant factor in my calculation. And also, if we're not going to build 6-story buildings where they're accounted for in our planning and on high frequency transit corridors with commercial activity like Lake Street, where do we put them? And so I'm actually not in favor of the motion before us and we'll be voting against it. And I also have concerns about putting traffic into the alleyway.
All right, I might look for some staff direction. I think a little clarity around if we are going with the staff direction to open up to grant the appeal on the parking and the opening, what that does for the rest, and some direction on what motions would make sense.
Sure. So staff is supportive of the appeal of the condition to remove the access off of Harriet. So we would support granting that appeal of that condition. That condition was attached to the conditional use permit. With regard to the height and setback issue, I would just point out that this project is seeking an upzoning. They're qualifying for 25% density bonuses on top of that, and they are exceeding the maximum recommended density, which is 120 dwelling units per acre. That's the high density land use classification for this property in the comp plan, going to 213 dwelling units per acre. So staff's perspective on that is that the loss of 3 units is not as consequential as to the benefits that setback would deliver in terms of mitigating the bulk of the project.
Well, thank you. Councilmember Goodman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But Mr. Crandall, what doesn't make sense to me is there's not a single person here objecting to it. I mean, usually, and almost always, when there is more density than what's allowed being proposed, the room is filled with people who are very upset. And in this case, perhaps because of the affordable nature of the project, perhaps because of the partnership with the VFW, people understand the trade-off between affordable housing and density. So I guess I would, as someone who has to work on financing affordable housing, as does Councilmember Gordon, I hate to see a situation where, as a result of us removing these units, they come back and ask us for more money. I mean, that's my fear, is that this is probably a tax credit project. So I would guess it might even be is it a 9% tax credit project? So it's a 4% tax credit project. So they're going to ask us for more money with tax credits. They'll probably have to ask us for more money for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it would make sense for us to pay a little bit of attention to the fact that we're kind of a financing partner in the project. And if we really want affordable in this location, we want them to stack these units appropriately so that we can get lower cost per unit. That's something, as you know, we've been complaining about a lot. Councilmember Schrader and I in particular think cost containment is a big issue. And I believe this is a project that's under 250, maybe even under 200 per unit, which is unheard of for affordable housing projects. So I think we should, if we want an affordable project in this kind of non-impacted location, we should be conscious of that.
Thank you. Councilmember Wright? Oh, Councilmember Gordon.
I guess I did want to just kind of clarify if there was much opposition at the Planning Commission from the community about the density here. I understand nobody's here to speak on this appeal, but could somebody just give me a little report back on how that hearing went?
There was not a lot of opposition from the community in relation to the project. And I'll just say, while staff is certainly sensitive to that, and I can't comment on the larger community sentiment, we do make our recommendations based on adopted policy. So.
I totally understand that, and we should, and we make our decisions based on findings and on adopted policy as well, but we try to be sensitive and understand the community. Was there, and just to follow up on that, was there any kind of letter of support from the neighborhood organization for the project?
There are several letters of support that are included in your packet, yeah.
So, and then can I just ask about number 6, the condition about the windows? It seemed like it was so specific. Does that just have to do with a way of making sure they're meeting our minimum window requirements?
No, that was a condition proposed by the Planning Commission with regard to the alleyway. There's no minimum window requirement on that location, but they wanted to create additional visibility between the enclosed parking garage and the alley, and to create more visual interest along that wall, being kind of a blank wall. I don't have particularly strong feelings about that condition remaining. So
I could see how it could create a sense of safety, maybe if you're walking down the alley and that, to think there's a little more openness so I could appreciate it, but I was curious about your view on that. I'm looking at it and I'm thinking there might be a way that we could grant the appeal on 1 and 5 and maybe deny it on the others. It sounds like Councilmember Reich is interested in granting it on all the items, and I'm not sure about Councilmember Goodman, but maybe it seems to me, at least my theory about if you open up the access to the garage with 5, and also I'm sympathetic to having more units, and I'm also sympathetic to the argument that the step back doesn't really bring that many benefits, because in terms of the shadowing, but also how it's already gonna feel like it's a building that's big and towering next to the 2-story. So that was a theory I had, is granting 1 and 5 and maybe denying the others, but now it sounds like 6 maybe isn't that important either.
Well, with that, I'm going to withdraw my motion and ask Councilmember Gordon if that was a motion for 1 and 6, or if it sounded like they need a little more clarity. He said 1 and 5 and 6. Which I just said into a microphone.
Granting 1, 5, and 6 is what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, seeing a lot of nodding, I guess I'm willing to be the one to put my name on the motion then to grant the appeal on 1, 5, and 6 and deny the appeal on 2, 3, and 4.
All right, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm fine with that. I just want us to discuss this fence thing a little bit more. If it were me and I was living next door, I'd want a decorative fence. I would not want it to be, we're asking people to screen garbage. We're asking them to screen recycling. I would want that. They'd probably save money by not building a bigger fence. But if I lived next door or even in the area, I would probably want that. So I just want to chime in on that.
Anyone else? All right, then we have Councilmember Gordon's motion to approve 1, 5, and 6, which is the conditional use permit, the site plan review, and also regarding the auto entry, as well as number 6 on the window requirements. Councilmember Gordon.
Councilmember Gordon tells me I could amend to add item 2 as well.
All right, Councilmember, new motion for 1, 2, 5, and 6. Mr. Clerk, just some advice. To preview my vote, I will be approving some of those and not denying others. Is it fine to just say yes on this and no on others, on certain numbers, and yes on others? Then if the clerk could call the roll.
Yes, that's fine. And you can certainly put the granting of 1, 2, 5, and 6 and the denial of 3 and 4 within the same motion.
Okay.
Is that clear?
If I may, with number 4, I think you all agreed we were going to grant that, and it's not in your motion. So is that separate action? That's the
we're going to take that's a suggestion from the floor, Councilmember Gordon, open to amending his?
I think you were
No, it
intending
is
to
the
add
winding.
Item 2, the fence. Is that
Yeah.
right? To grant the appeal on item 2 regarding the fence height, in addition to the other 3. Is that right?
That was Councilmember Goodman's, I guess, friendly amendment to my motion, was to grant the appeal on the denying the variance to increase the maximum fence height. But I was wanting to deny the appeal in terms of the minimum window requirement along Harriet Avenue.
We've met that. We can meet that.
Good.
We can,
Yep. So
we just want to get rid of the garage door elimination.
Councilmember Goodman.
I just want to clarify that I agree with Councilmember Gordon on the windows, and it sounds like there's some unanimity, and also on the fiber cement, no harm, no foul, redesign it so that it meets the Planning Commission's criteria. So that would eliminate 3 and 4. So I understand Councilmember Gordon's motion to be approving the appeal on 1, 2, 5, and 6. And I would suggest if the chair wanted, you could just take them all individually.
I think we might do that. And actually, what I would like to clarify in number 2, the denying of the variance to increase, never mind. I answered
It
my
would
own
allow
question.
them to build a
Yes.
taller fence because I think that's what the neighbors would want.
Right. All right, well, why don't we move the motion on number 1? If the clerk could call the roll, if we're ready for that. All right.
Councilmember Ellison. Goodman.
Aye.
Gordon.
Aye.
Wright.
Aye.
Chair Schrader.
No.
There are 4 ayes and 1 nay.
All right, that motion passes. We'll move on number 2. Clerk could call the, and actually I am going to, maybe we could take 2 through 6 all together. And I think it sounds like we have unanimity unless I see otherwise. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries.
So, Mr. Chair, to clarify, that was a motion to grant the appeals on 2 through 6?
Yes.
2,
Well,
5, and 6.
2, 5, and 6, and then we've worked out that they will be okay with their appeal not being approved.
Well, we voted to
That's what's
deny
gonna
the
happen,
appeal.
whether they're okay
I
or
moved
not.
to deny the appeal on 3 and 4, and that passed.
How about we check in after this, if that would be acceptable? Because I
Okay.
think that we've figured it out here, as far as I know, and I understand that we'll have to be a little more specific on the ends, if people are all right with that. Yeah.
If you'd like, Mr. Chair, we could deny the appeal on 3 and 4, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I'm sure, let's, on 3 and
Mr.
4.
Crandall's saying do that, so.
Okay, then let's, the motion is to deny 3 and 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and 3 and 4 are denied. With that, we are going to move on to our final item, which is the discussion of a rezoning at the Lake Street Apartments. Now, this is the same application we've been talking about. If we could have kind of I don't know that we need a staff presentation unless I see otherwise from anyone. With that, I'm actually just going to make the motion unless I see any discussion. I'm going to make the motion to approve the rezoning. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and that motion carries. And that is with no other business before us. We are adjourned.